Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Nekrogoblikon, The Fundamental Slimes and Humours, out April 1st on District Lines. This record has 11 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's fifth full-length studio album. They are an American melodic death metal band. A band that in my opinion has turned the knob all the way to 11 with this record. There's really nothing new here. That is the main difference. The album feels a lot stronger in terms of the volume, in terms of the approach, in terms of how abrupt it is. It's a very volatile sounding record. It's very chaotic in its construction and its design, and that is the main difference that this album is going to put forward, at least from a construction perspective. A record that doesn't paint you a roadmap for you to really connect with the songs and find your way through it in order for the playability to stay intact from start to finish. On one hand, you feel like you're listening to 11 different songs from 11 different bands, and on the other hand, you can still find the DNA of Nekrogoblikon across all 11 of them, so you can see that they all belong to them, but you don't necessarily see how they all belong to the same record. And that is the main problem of how this album comes across. It has strength in the individual songs, but that strength doesn't have a positive impact into the collective. As far as the soundscape is concerned, this album has big sound, but big sound doesn't always mean good sound. And I felt that the drums and guitars on this record were very blunt because they worked as one. It was very hard to define where one ended and where the other one started in terms of their shapes, their forms, and their impact to the tracks, to the musicality of the songs, and even to the drive that the songs have. You just feel like they're coming together, working together in the same lane, but not in parallel lanes, which would make the sound feel still as big, but better defined, giving a much better experience all around. So when you're listening to this album, it's very hard to see where things are going. Everything is just coming together. Everything is in a bag. And I would like to see this album with better definition around the drums and guitars so that the overall experience becomes a little bit more straightforward, easier to digest, easier to understand, easier to gravitate to, and also easier to deal with all the other things that are happening, all the other moving pieces. All the chaos that this album has would feel perhaps a little bit less chaotic if drums and guitars had a more defined role throughout this entire album and not blending together as much as they do from start to finish. Within the sound, my favorite element is definitely the keyboards. They have a very EDM experience to it, sometimes folky as well, but the movement that the keyboard sound gives to this record is really something that has always been the DNA of Nekrogoblikon, but on this record is maybe pushed a little bit more to the edge, but an edge that I'm very comfortable with, and was one of the elements that really created some shapes, that really broke that mold, that bluntness of sound that exists on this album. It is perhaps a little bit eased by the keyboard influence, by the sound that they provide, by the movement that they give, the melody that they offer. All of these things make the record feel a little bit more brighter, make the record feel like it has a little bit more soul, like it's a little bit more alive. But you can't just depend on one element alone. But the keyboards are definitely one of the bright spots of this record, of its soundscape, of its experience. Now, once you go into the vocals, this is a Nekrogoblikon through and through. Everything you've heard in previous records, you're going to see it on this album. There's no reinventing of the wheel. Nothing really changes. Very dynamic, a lot of movement, matching exactly what the songs are giving you from a lyrical content perspective, from a movement perspective, making the tracks come alive with different tonalities, with different approaches, with different styles almost, that makes the record feel perhaps a little bit more Nekrogoblikon from that perspective. Definitely one of the elements that grounds this record or that connects this record. When I was mentioning earlier that all 11 songs could be from 11 different bands, but at the same time they had that Nekrogoblikon condiments in it, that flavor in it that really brings them together and allows you to understand that you're listening to 11 songs from the same band. The vocals are definitely that element, at least one of those elements that allows this record to have more of a sense of grounding and that connects this record a lot better to the band. Overall, I feel like this record is a little bit of a shot over the bow. It came close, but it completely missed. So I'm not sure that this is an album that going forward really gonna live the test of time. It doesn't have the sense of quality across the collective, and that hurts the album. There are some great songs on this record. There are some incredible, memorable tracks on this album, but there's also some tracks that leave you scratching your head, wondering what the hell is going on. Is somebody on acid? You're just really not sure what they were trying to do by putting together an album that is this diverse, that is this volatile from start to finish. I don't mind some volatility, I don't mind some chaos, specifically when it comes to Nekrogoblikon, but I still want some boundaries in terms of where that chaos can exist, and this record has none. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Yin, heavy track, pounding musically and at times even vocally. So this allows this song to have this great movement to it, a very compound movement to it. Now the keyboards infuse a ton of melody to this track, bringing some brightness to the song, dissipating a little bit of that heaviness that the track has behind it. The drums and the guitars pack the sound as they do throughout the entire record, but on this song the keyboards really help dissipate a little bit of that heaviness, a little bit of that compounding factor. You still have volume, you still have movement, but it doesn't feel as robust. The vocals are really interesting because they offer more of a linear aspect from start to finish. This is one of those tracks where you're not going to get peaks and valleys, a roller coaster ride vocally. It stays very connected, very constant, but it really helps the song being that way. It makes the song feel a lot more straightforward. It makes the song feel more enjoyable, easier to understand, easier to grasp, and therefore giving it more of a lasting memory in terms of how the whole track comes across. Next you have Bones. Very electronic intro at the start, and I absolutely love it. I love that intro, and I love the tone that it sets for the rest of the track, allowing the song to have this melodic backdrop that really lives off of what the keyboards are doing. It stays consistent and it stays connected with the track itself. It has a great chorus. It makes the song feel memorable from that perspective because you're always waiting for that chorus. You're always waiting for the moment that it comes, and that makes it feel more hooky, more catchy, giving a different life to the track all around. It mixes heaviness, it mixes melody. It creates movement by bringing those two worlds together. It's a very engaging track because it offers you two different perspectives, two very different experiences as you move from the verses into the chorus, but at the same time they're very well connected, so it's not abrupt in that movement, in that experience. Last but not least, Fancy Wind, a very upbeat track, a track that has some elements of The Killers. I felt like I was listening to Mr. Brightside if The Killers were a heavier band, or Mr. Brightside if Nekrogoblikon decided to do a cover. It just had a lot of those pop rock elements to it. It had a very upbeat nature. It had great movement. It felt very bouncy, very happy, very electric. And that is a very interesting aspect for the song itself, because when you look at this track, there are a little bit there is some darkness to it. There is some undertones of darkness in it, but the brightness that it has, it really brings a different vibe to the forefront, almost like telling a sad story with a smile on your face. That's how this track comes across, and because of that, I really gravitated to it. I really gravitated to that heavy metal, death metal, pop punk sound that they put together musically and vocally for Fancy Wind. Really stayed with me, regardless of how many times I listened to this album. This was always one of the songs that I wanted to go back to. I wanted to experience it again and again and again. This is it. This is Nekrogoblikon with the Fundamental Slimes and Humours. Once again, out April 1st on District Lines. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.